I have been holding off on making this video for a good little while now, because truthfully, I didn't know how I was gonna go about it. That was until I sat down in a park, saw some bugs, and decided to start recording. So, I ask you to give me half an hour of your time to let me prove the existence and reality of optimistic nihilism and absurdity, and disprove pessimistic thought. Look at this caterpillar on a public park bench and pay attention to what it's doing. At first glance, you might be thinking, it just seems like an ordinary caterpillar, ones that are at the very least common in the North American continent. The only thing more striking about it would be that it's exceedingly large for most of its species, which, on that note, you would be right. But I don't really mean just what it's doing on a first glance observation, obviously. I mean what it is doing in essence. And even those who are more introspective and have higher knowledge towards philosophical concepts, if you think you know where I'm going with this, you might be somewhat surprised. Ooh. Ouch. That must have really hurt the caterpillar. In fact, a fall like that could have severely injured it. Maybe it did. And yet, miraculously, it's still trying to climb back up to its original position on the bench. Desperately trying. When I initially saw this and started recording, or had initially seen what the caterpillar was doing, I really had to stop and think, why? Why is the caterpillar just moving? Why is it just going back and forth on the park bench? The obvious answer would be that, well, it's most likely searching for any sort of food sustenance, maybe shelter, if, well, it's fertile and pregnant, looking for a leaf to lay eggs on. Or maybe just looking for a way down from the actual bench. And though all of the above may be true, let's acknowledge one crucial thing here. The caterpillar, objectively, has no actual insight into whether any of these are an actual possibility. The caterpillar has no actual awareness as to whether any of the aforementioned outcomes, or desired outcomes, if that is what the caterpillar is desiring, will actually come true. The bench is merely the object they are on. They're combing it, searching it endlessly for something, anything, really anything that'll get it to a more desirable point in their life. And even look here. I found this miraculous. The caterpillar, on its cognitive intellectual capabilities, seems to have known precisely where it fell from. Like, look at this. This isn't the caterpillar just on some level climbing out of randomness. It knew it fell. It knew it was at a higher position before, and that's where it had wanted to be. And it made efforts to climb all the way back up. I could make a cliche philosophy joke here, saying something like, one must think the caterpillar happy, or I squirm, therefore I am. But I'll refrain from doing that. But in all essence, it crawls aimlessly. Now look at the caterpillar from this zoom out shot. It appeared, and again, for its species, is extraordinarily large, like thick, like dummy thick large. But compared to the human-crafted park bench alone, something that we would consider to be an object that is maybe moderate size to us at the most, is absolutely enormous to the caterpillar. It's an entire landscape to them. A complete, barren, open, wide space for a world of exploration. Look at it compared to the size of it. So even if the caterpillar desires food, a place to give birth, shelter, or merely a way off of the bench, which the only real way would be to climb down onto the legs, which for them would be many miles down, it ultimately doesn't matter. They are in essence squirming along aimlessly, but yet with a purpose of their own. They have no actual way of foreseeing if there is any true objective to what they are doing, but yet they continue, because they have a will to it. And even here, when I offer out my hand as aid to help it finally get off of the bench, it at first refuses and tests it out a bit more, once again, and then refuses again. It tries to keep going all on its own, testing the limits even further of what it's capable of. I think if the caterpillar had any sense psychologically of self, it should be proud of its achievements. I hope it is. So what am I getting at with this whole long-winded analogy? Well, for the caterpillar, its whole existence, its desires, its physical attempts at getting somewhere, its very biology, what it is programmed to do in order to keep itself alive, is entirely pointless when met with the grander external world around it, the greater external universe. One could even count it as a universe within a universe, as its cosmos is pretty much just the human world. I think it's, well, if it was of more weaker emotional fragility in some way, in terms of reasoning, if it was able to gain awareness of our space-bound cosmos, it might just have a stroke. But yet, even though it is pointless, its entire existence is impactful. How? Because it traversed the bench. It walked it. It left its little feet marks on it. It fell and smacked into the wood. And now it is crawling amongst my arm, and I am recording it. It impacted me. It got my attention. A far larger creature, a god to it, that could completely end its existence in horrible maliciousness if I so chose to. And yet it trusts me. And I was able to observe its struggle. It impacted me. Even now, as I offer, as you can see in the footage, it to go onto a tree to continue its journey, it doesn't. Some may say, well, maybe it doesn't know that the tree is right there. No, it clearly can, its sensory organs can pick up a bit of the terrain it's on. And it knows in some way that there is some other object there. Now we'll get back to the caterpillar soon enough. In the next few clips of footage, you will see an ant crawling along the same bench, aimlessly wandering and scattering about, seemingly trying to find any source of food, whilst some flies buzz around in a herd looking for the same thing. But the ant has a different method of trying to find any bits of necessary nutrition. In another clip, you'll see an ant climbing up what to it is a ginormous tree. If that ant was to have been born at the base, hatched as a larva, and began climbing up that tree, at such point in time, it would be elderly and close to death by the time it even got a fourth of the way up that tree. Another clip, you'll see a mite crawling up my arm, and another mite crawling on my boot. Both of which, to it, are entire continents. Something so microscopic to my eyes, it probably doesn't even conceive that it's crawling on another living being. I'm so ginormous to the mites. And another, you'll see a fly scattering around on my sleeping bag. looking for I don't even know what. Whilst the rest of the footage of the insects plays, I want to share a story. You can think of it as my own version of Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I've had it in my mind for a while, but now I'm finally ready to put it into words and share it. There once lived a person, long ago in the past and far off in the future, who had done a plethora of things with their life. Many morally righteous acts, but a fair share of terrible deeds as well, that they deeply regretted. They had traversed many lands, and integrated themselves in some way to a variety of communities, and always, no matter where they were able to help someone, or even entire groups of people within those lands in some way. They knew this full well, and for the regrettable actions that they had committed, they knew that they had surpassed that point in their life, and they knew that they had changed their values and would never again try to attempt such deeds. And yet, despite all that they had done, all these many great and disastrous things, they felt completely and totally unfulfilled, dissatisfied, and were plagued by a constant emotional restlessness that for the longest while they could never seem to pin down the cause of, until they eventually realized the reason behind their psychological agitation was because, on some level, despite all the beneficial things they had committed and the detrimental things they had committed, for the benefits, on some level, they were never fully appreciated for the things they had provided to said communities. Never given really duly deserved, at least as far as they felt, praise for their actions. And they knew that they desperately desired it so. Even though what they did counted and helped extensively, most people did not recognize that it was them who initiated it. And as for the destructive actions, though they know that they had undergone change within themselves, they still felt that they hadn't received any true duly just punishment for their atrocities, even with their self-inflicted regrets, and even with those they had wronged, either forgiving them or simply walking out of their lives and them accepting that they had to leave as they couldn't forgive them. They stew over this for many nights and days, until eventually they come across a child who tells them that they have just finished helping their parents build a home for them to live in, and that it's the most beautiful place they've ever had to stay. But during the construction, they accidentally banged one of the tools into one of their parents' limbs, and it injured them quite badly. Their parent wasn't angry at them about it, they knew it was an accident, but they still regretted it and felt horrible. And at this moment, the person has a shocking revelation. Oh my gosh, I don't matter, and my life is entirely meaningless. This child, who I have just met, I have never seen once before in my many years, who has not lived near the life experience that I have, and has not been to any of the places that I have been, has done and experienced in essence the same things that I have. I myself have helped construct various housing units in various settlements across the globe, and I myself have deep rooted regrets. And yet they have come to the same conclusions, the same understanding, and same thought process at this current point in time that I have. My life is entirely pointless. This destroys them mentally, and in that moment, they feel that if this is just the entire essence of existence, of human life, and that in the grander whole of humanity they do not matter, then this is the worst thing that could have ever happened to them. And if that is the only possibility of all of life, then the worst is the only thing that can remain. This drives them into a complete existential crisis that lasts many years, culminating in severe depression and an attempt at suicide on their part. As they brace themselves for ending their life, the person thinks back as to why they feel they can no longer continue living. And they say, because my life is entirely and then they stop. And at that moment, another shocking revelation comes to their prefrontal cortex. Oh my gosh, my life is entirely meaningless, but entirely impactful. Wait a minute. If that child many years ago learnt the same things that I did, came to all the same rationalized conclusions that I had about life without ever having knowing me, then by this logic, there will always be someone out there in the world who knows exactly the things that I know and has felt the exact same sentiments as I have felt. And if the only way that I gained those sentiments was through connection to the greater whole of humanity around me, at the very least on a level of validation, then everything I have achieved, everything that I have done with my life has made an impact, whether for better or for worse, whether others acknowledged it or even noticed it or not. They still interacted with what I have done in some form. My choices, no matter what they were, have in fact made a tangible effect, had a noticeable and extensively prevalent on some level impact on the greater environment around me. And in that, in the essence of existence. And with this being truthful, then life is worth living. And not merely because of this ability of mine to create my own purpose, though that is a definitive fact, no doubt, but because I will never truly die. Because if all choices that I have ever made and thoughts that I have had, am currently having, and will have are to be shared on some level, consciously and subconsciously, by the whole of humanity, and will continue conceptually to be rediscovered throughout the rest of humankind's time, then my life force will never truly cease. I will remain in this metaphysical immortality for all of time. If every human trait has always been, then what is me shall always be, and the concept of I shall always remain, with every decision I have enacted and put forth into the world. If all of thinking and choice is to be recycled and has been recycled by someone 600 years before me, or 300 years after me, or is going on in someone's mind right now of a person who I have no knowledge of in existence and I've never met and never will meet, then this is true human immortality. This is true eternal recurrence, the repetition of the same. This is the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to me. Not because this realization absolves me of moral consequence, but because it absolves me of any true everlasting pain. And if this definitive reality is the best thing that could have happened to me, then my pessimism was truly a psychosis. The person then pulls down their pants and shouts at the top of their lungs, "Suck it, Arthur Schopenhauer, I found the true optimist within me." So for any of you out there who are in complete distress and are disturbed by the internal knowledge of nothingness, realize that you as an individual are needed and necessary, and consciously are never truly alone amongst the larger collective of humanity. Do not fall victim to hopelessness, for it does not exist. Do not try and distract from the pointlessness with pathetic hedonism, as it is merely a temporary and artificial solution. Be the overman. Be Sisyphus. Be the rebel. Be an intellectual. Be the ostracized black sheep, because unlike the rest of the herd, you can actually spot the wolf in sheep's clothing. Be the caterpillar, an absurdist nihilist and impactful till death.